Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be drawing the Invisible Man, the Universal Monster. I have him standing here in a padded room, and it's a two-point perspective drawing. And there's just going to be a lot of detail. This drawing the padded segments is going to take a lot of work, and I just kind of wanted to practice like drapery and fabric and see if I could create form, particularly with his face. So it's going to be a challenge, and in preparation for it, I watched Hollow Man from, I don't know if that was 2000 or 2002, and then I watched The Invisible Man from 2020, and you know, they both tackle the same character, but or at least the same concept of the character, but in radically different ways, and for that I think they're pretty interesting. Hollow Man is something I grew up with. I watched that, you know, probably roughly when it came out at the time, and I was probably in 6th grade. And you know, that's probably, in many respects, it's a much more faithful take on the character, at least how he's been portrayed classically. But I mean, I really think the 2020 film is a very good movie, and you know, it's a lot more socially aware, at least for today's relevance and what goes on in the world. The first Hollow Man and the Invisible Man prior, you know, was really kind of about science and going too far, and maybe, you know, maybe it's questionable if the main character is psychotic or power hungry or what. You know, it's kind of up for interpretation. But The Invisible Man in 2020 is much more metaphorical in what it's trying to tackle, which is, you know, a story about the lingering effects and paranoias that come from abuse. And it's a pretty powerful message that they are able to get across about, you know, doubt, paranoia, anxiety, how hard it is to get rid of a person who is abusive. But, you know, it has a ton of suspense for that. You know, the character, which difference between Invisible Man and 2020 and Hollow Man and the other Invisible Mans before that. Is that the older entries focused on the Invisible Man from his perspective, and Invisible Man 2020 flips that on its ear, and it is not about the Invisible Man and his perspective at all, his experiences of being invisible or anything like that. It's really about the torment that he inflicts on a person. You know, it was his partner, and she tries to leave him, and of course bizarre stuff starts happening in her life that can't be explained by anything other than, you know, someone, I guess, being invisible. And that sounds pretty crazy to say out loud to people. You know, I always think about that in history when, like, you know, a person who had schizophrenia might tell people they're hearing voices. Of course, that would lead to them being assumed to be possessed or something like that. And just the burden of proof that people who are experiencing terrible things have to somehow try and prove, you know. And of course, since this is a movie about an invisible man, the scientist is in fact invisible and perpetrating all these atrocities on her, just trying to ruin her life, if not her sanity, more or less, which again is another really good metaphor for the psychological trauma that is inflicted on people in abusive relationships. I'm not going to talk about Hollow Man as much, even though I do really like that movie. But it's just kind of a less interesting take on it to me, personally. It's a more straightforward take of just abuse of power. But, you know, that movie is kind of approached from a few different angles. So now I gotta figure out my horizon line was here, so it's really... So this cushion needs to come down more. It's actually, you know, drawing in perspective is always hard. But, number one, I'm not good at it. Number two, it's really hard to do it on black paper because I just can't see a lot of times what I'm doing very well. So this is a window right here. This is kind of like this section right here and over to the left is a door. Let's see if I can start blacking that in so that you, the viewer, can see a little bit of what I have going on in my head. Yeah, so this is like the door to the padded room, and then this right here is the corner of the room, the deepest corner behind him. And then this is the ceiling right here. Like I said, it's a two-point perspective. Horizon line is through kind of the middle of his head, since that's where we're looking. Maybe it's slightly below, because we're almost looking up, but it's not far off from the character's own height. I drew the character first and then decided, you know what, I want to try and really challenge myself, and so I came up with the concept of putting the Invisible Man in a straitjacket while still having his bandages and just being in a padded room and kind of in a yelling posture to encapsulate the frustration and or agony that he's experiencing. Because in Hollow Man and the older iterations of the Invisible Man, it's kind of implied that the process is what has brought the madness out of him of being turned invisible. And it's actually kind of a cool line in Hollow Man where he says something to the effect of, "It's amazing what you can do when you don't have to look at yourself in the mirror." And, you know, I don't know, I can't remember if that's a line that's used in the older films and shows, but it's a bit of a food for thought sort of statement, which I enjoyed. But Invisible Man 2020, like I said, so we're talking about the psychological effects of abuse and how that Invisible Man story is actually a really good parallel for this sort of haunting presence that exists in a person's life after they've even taken steps to extricate themselves from a toxic or bad environment. Yeah, the padded rooms can be really tough. I have certainly set myself on a path of challenge and possibly misery. But we're just going to keep chipping away at it. I'm in no rush. I don't have to be in a rush. First I was thinking of drawing something in the window here, you know, like a face or something like that. And, you know, I still might. So having these pads kind of curve out in front of the glass. Of course, I'll have to balance all the pads too around the light source, which I'm going to put above him and kind of over here because he's pretty far back set in the room, and I imagine padded cell type rooms have a single light source in the center of the room. That would just be my supposition. I have this paper towel down here to try and stop myself from marring up the page too much. As I work across, I'm going to try and do sort of a left to right, up and down fashion, since I have so much ground to cover. Which is the way you're supposed to draw if you're worried about results. I'm not sure where the Invisible Man falls in the pantheon of the Universal monsters. He's kind of like the most relatable out of all of them in a way, since he is just a human. But I almost think that maybe detracts from the fascination we have with the other, kind of Eastern European classical monsters like Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula. The page is not taking too well over here. I'm not sure why. Not a big deal because this area would be like in a frame if it was, for some reason it was ever framed, it's probably cut off to about here anyways. Try a different pencil. Sometimes the pencil just... it's not going too well. I don't know why, if it's this batch that I bought or what, but I've just had this problem pretty much in every vid that I've done for you guys, and I never used to have this problem with the paper of it not being able to stick. And so maybe it's a me thing, the way I'm storing it or drawing on it when I do my graphite pencils, but The Invisible Man was actually a novel by H.G. Wells, I think in 1897 or something. And yeah, I believe that, actually I don't want to say without being certain, but I guess that's what I'm going to do, because I can always sort of correct it, is I think The Invisible Man was kind of, they had a little success with Frankenstein, and they thought, what else can we use to do horror on the big screen, because movies were just sort of starting to come alive as a concept. And I remember I did read the figure of what H.G. Wells sold the rights for. And I can't remember it now. Obviously a low number based on how things would go, but again, this is at the beginning of film and cinema as a sort of entertainment venture. So I'm trying to build up these ones down here, kind of in the middle and arcing across the pad, because the light is over here. It's going to hit this fat part of the pad here. But I'm going to have to do that a lot in this as I work through how I think a padded room would be lit. Not too many more pads to do down here. Hollow Man, of course, does sort of look to answer the question of what would people do with this sort of, what is basically a superpower, right, of being invisible. And the conclusion reached in that movie is obviously nothing good. That includes voyeurism and, you know, I guess we don't exactly know in the movie just how many people he killed. It's a little undetermined. He assaults a girl and we don't know the outcome of that. But, you know, he goes on to kill most of his companions that were scientists down in the lab, as well as a military or high-ranking officer who was sort of told that they had converted him to, they had run the invisibility program on him when they weren't supposed to. Overall, they're both good movies. Hollow Man's more fun, probably, and Invisible Man is just more, it's very serious and psychological. Alright, so I'm just gonna do my charcoal pencil in between all the cushions for now. I always find it kind of helps with blending when I already put in the lines, because then the darks, where it's supposed to be dark, will mix with the white of the pencil and make a sort of grayish color, which will be, obviously, it's just a value that I'll have to try and make by adding charcoal and white together. If I was drawing on white paper, your charcoal and white already kind of make gray when you just blend the charcoal around. But that's why I actually like drawing on black paper, is because I have to manually kind of create all the values, and I find a lot of satisfaction in that. Kind of an awkward angle here, but I'm trying not to block you guys from seeing the cushions go in. Trying to add a slight curve to them too, as they would pucker and billow. Yes, it always frustrates me when the page just doesn't take much tone. That one. Yeah, see, this is supposed to be more like that. Okay. So I'll use the brush to blend out the blacks first. You can see it already kind of creates a gray tone at the edge of. Now that I've done that. Which, as I said, is the desired look I'm going for. The shadows are going to be deeper on this back side of every cushion over here. So it's going to create this sort of diamond-like I can kind of use the brush to also draw the curves like I'm trying to do. It's hard because when I draw, I really just want to be drawing faces and emotions. And so doing stuff like this always feels a little more tedious to me. But backgrounds and environments are arguably our best way of telling a story. Maybe second best if you know, the face or your story's kind of told through face, gesture, and environment. And so, me having avoided environments, I'm missing out on a big part of storytelling because I want to push. Right. I really don't know how much of this will be even shown down here by the time light scatters and falls, plus our characters in the foreground, and I think it'll just be sort of distracting. Edge of our character. Alright, I'm going to stop the video for there. I'm just going to blend all these and sort of see where I end up. I'm not even taking into account the light source yet. What I'm going to do is just blend it all and maybe try and get some highlights just to create form. But then what I tend to do is once I have a better feeling for the light source, I'll go in and start dramaticizing those areas. So like for example, the light as it approaches the corner of the room, it's probably going to be in this sort of V shape. As we talked about with the diamonds here, it's going to kind of be a diamond here of darkness in the corner of the room. But it might even be like a good third of the wall that you could do that to. So anyways, I don't worry about that straight away. I just try and create form, and then I focus on how it looked balanced in the light. So anyways, I'll catch you guys in a little bit. Alright, hey guys, welcome back. I kind of got the padded room going. It's not like fully shaded, it's just kind of toned. But I wanted to get into actually drawing the bandages on the Invisible Man here, so that's what we're going to do. I don't know, this will be a fun process. I don't usually do a lot of drapery, and so that's why I wanted to really actually do this drawing, was to focus on that. So I have these bandages sort of flying off of him, like pulling away, just to try and give the drawing a sense of motion. And because motion creates a dynamic image, and I'm trying to go bigger than I have lately in terms of just what I'm accomplishing with the drawing. Really try and disconnect. It's going to be hard because the padded room's going to be white and he's going to be white with the white pencil and obviously just the straight jacket. So I'm going to have to try and create some subtle contrast between the background and the subject of the image. I ended up going back and looking up what H.G. Wells had been paid for The Invisible Man, and at the time in 1932 maybe, it was $10,000, which I think today comes out to about $300K. And I'm guessing that's actually pretty competitive for the industry these days. I can't speak with any authority on that. I know screenplays sold for obviously more and less, but I don't feel like that's a bad price. You certainly didn't give it away for like $1. So, you know, and I'm sure that Universal would consider it a success that they paid that much for it at the time. I'm leaving parts of his head not wrapped, and I'll just leave it. I mean, I'm going to try and draw like the background behind him in those areas. Or bandages from the other side. But I wanted to just kind of show that he was transparent. I'm going to try and let the strokes, pencil strokes, create a lot of the sort of bandage texturing that comes with, you know, because ace bandages are kind of like pleated. Maybe they have vertical and horizontal lines through them, kind of like a grid. So maybe I just implement that as part of my structure here, and possibly it'll help create that look just by default. You know, because when you're drawing, you want your pencil strokes to make sense for the form that they're doing. You know, like if you're doing a cylinder or something like that, you want to make them in a kind of circular motion. So anyways, doing pencil strokes to make sense for the subject you're doing, you know, that's a good way to help yourself out. So like I said, I'm going to do that for this and just see where it gets me. Ace bandages are also always a little thicker on the edge of the bandage. So we'll do that as well. Trying to draw it pinched in some areas too, like it, as it wraps around the form of the head. So that's kind of what the idea is in this area, is like it kind of gets bent and pinched. I don't know, I'm just trying to create dynamic fabric so that it's not so uniform and samey. I don't necessarily know what makes good drapery, but I don't know that people do when they're looking at it either, but they know when it doesn't look right. Which is one of those weird phenomenon about drawing or just anything with the human eye of like, we don't necessarily know when things look right, but we do know when they look wrong. Make this line a little thicker there. So when you're drawing, you have that hard task of, you know, figuring that out. And a lot of times you won't see it when you've been drawing and are close to the image for a while. You actually have to take a step back, take a break, get water, and then look at it from a different perspective. You know, usually, a lot of times I just see it when I'm walking back to my chair to draw, of where things are going wrong. Another good way is to take a photo of it with like your cell phone, and then you'll be looking at it through the camera lens, and it'll just help you sort of see a little better. Yeah, I don't even know if I'm gonna blend these. I sort of don't want to. Maybe I'll try one here and see what it looks like, just very lightly. I think it looks better just with the raw pencil markings. I think that'll also be how I draw interest from the viewer from the foreground to the background, is having these raw pencil strokes, whereas the background's going to be more blended, so it should, you know, maybe lessen the visual impact of it. Because we're not going to have a high contrast piece here. Everything's pretty much white padded room, white bandages, white straight jacket. And I think that sort of grid structure we come up with is actually working in a way. Like you said, I can't tell. I'm too close to it sometimes, you know, as it stands right now, to really see if it's a cool effect, but and then a good way, like, since, you know, maybe this bandage is a little beneath the other one, you can, like, I just use the brush to knock down some of the tone a bit. I'm not actually, like, I'm not brushing it across the page, I'm just kind of tapping it on there. I tried to do the bandages in a way that helped give some form or dimension to the face as well, because he's going to be in kind of a yelling gesture. Again, with the goal of the dynamic drawing. It's always challenging to try and not block the camera too much when I do this. Like, ideally I just lean directly over what I'm doing here if I didn't have a camera. And then I'll do the grid. So I'm also dropping the pressure of my pencil strokes for the bandages that are further in the background. You know, just trying to use all the tactile help I can get here by. So like right there, that's just very light pressure. Trying to see how I have the bandage here. I think I just had it as a small one, like that you wouldn't see, that would just round over. Maybe it did go like this. Maybe let's do that. Yeah, we'll say that this bandage flowed into this one that's supposed to mimic sort of the orbital socket. Pencil's not taking well there. Anytime you hear my chair squeak, it's because I'm trying to gain a different viewing perspective. So pretty frequently. And so, with the bandages, you know, I tried to create a sense of form in the shapes they made here, but I'm also going to have to implement a bit of a light source, you know, like this part here, which is sort of the edge of the mouth. Here's the nose, so here's like the edge of the, you know, your lips would kind of be like this. This part's going to have to be probably a little brighter, so I'll use the brush to kind of create that contrast right there. And maybe a tone back up here. Sorry I'm not talking too much, I'm just kind of focusing on what I can do here to make these bandages interesting. I think it's looking pretty cool. I can't... Like I said, I generally won't be able to tell until I stand up, but you know, probably speaks more to when you're drawing your mood, how you're viewing it as you go along, because you're always going to be more critical of it, I assume, at least if we're talking about me, in the moment in which you're drawing it. So I always look at it as if I'm sort of looking at it and thinking like, oh, it's not so bad, whilst I'm doing it, that maybe it's turning out even better than I had hoped. This bandage here I wanted, but you know, if it's going to be flying off backwards, I'm trying to figure out how to draw that exactly. It's going to be like, I don't think my outline I had here was right. This might be a little better here. It'd be bright on this corner here, come up, be bright on that corner, like that. Again, I'm sorry if this part is boring content-wise. This would just be more if you're interested in drawing. I don't know, I wonder if I should have a bandage going through there. Let's lightly blast it in and see how it looks. Just like that. And we'll go for it. Alright guys, I'll spare you from the boringness of this, and next time we pick up, maybe I'll be down here trying the straight jacket. Alright, see you then. Alright guys, we're here at the end. I've, as you can see, I've progressed a lot from the last time I cut out. You know, I did the padded room and did the straight jacket to the best of my current abilities, which is to say I need to do a lot of practice on drapery. This is the second side I did, which I think is a little better than the first side. Also, I just, you know, I'm starting to see maybe some of the limitations, or maybe not even limitations, but challenges with black paper and white pencil, and the sheer amount of tone I have to add to the page, and then try and control the different values, which in fabric, that's just really hard to do. At least I'm finding. So I need to work on that. I still love the way portraits and things like that with black paper end up looking, so I'm going to keep working on it. But thanks for watching if you made it this far. Hopefully I'll be able to produce a better result in the next drawing. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.